This is a guide to the range of species you're likely to catch in spring and summer, to the marks worth fishing in Seaford Bay, and the rigs you're likely to use in order to catch those fish. It is aimed at visiting anglers and is from personal experience rather than from local expert knowledge. My main reason for coming here is to catch plaice, and it can be here in abundance. They are present here from mid-February to October and can still be caught in November. A dozen plaice in a session is not uncommon. You're just as likely to catch them on the ebb as you are on the flood, so don't just give up at the top of the tide. Do fish it right down if you haven't caught already. A matching pair of rods for long range fishing helps maximise your chances of catching. Braid and sensitive tips aids bite detection. But you don't need the latest high-tech gear or a continental approach to catch. I have found that there's no real advantage to using long strings of beads and very long snoods. Black lug, occasionally tipped with squid, will sort out the better fish, but you're just as likely to catch on rag, which is just as well since rag is always available in the local shops, but black lug is sometimes difficult to get hold of. My most successful rig for plaice is a simple free hook, clip down, short snood affair. Clipping down helps with range, but many locals find two hook flapper rigs just as effective. I have used loop rigs here, but haven't been very successful with them. One rig I wouldn't be without is what I refer to as my two snoods sole rig. This has caught me plaice at times when all other rigs have failed, and more often than not with ragworm as bait. This rig allows me to get that extra distance, which is possibly why I catch more fish on it than my other rigs. As its name suggests, it's the rig I turn to most for catching soles, and there are plenty of them here to catch, and usually of a large size. The prime time for soles is an hour and a half into the ebb or halfway down the tide. This is often when others have packed up or thinking about going home. On this occasion, the beach had been packed with anglers all day, but most left at the top of the tide. Ironically, after thanking James for his leftover bait and discussing the merits of match fishing, I pointed out that I had been catching soles late in the tide, and right on cue, my tip moves round.
Go on, have you got one? Are you in? Yeah.
This is the typical size at Seaford. I prefer to use boom rigs at short range, although I haven't caught many soles on it at Seaford. Making the short snood distance rig is quite straightforward. I prefer to use the old Cascade clips rather than Cascade swivels, as I think the short snoods unclip better using these. My hook of choice is the Mustard Nordic Bend in a size 3. A retainer hook is used on the lower snood. I either go for the Wormer in a size 8, or a cheaper version is a Fladden Vantage Pro Match, again in an 8. If I'm targeting soles, then I'll use red 10 pound Maxima as hook length line. Don't ask me why, but red seems to work really well for soles. I like to use £60 rig body line in yellow. Again, don't ask me why, but I just have confidence in this combination of colours. I use crimps and mono for stop knots. For beads, I use 8mm luminescent oval shaped ones. The clips I use to attach to lead depends on what type of sinker I'm using. For pyramid leads and many other types of leads, then a clip with a bend to secure your hook is required. I tend to use about 70 centimetres for the rig body line and 25 centimetres for each of the snoods. I start by making the lower snood, threading on the retainer hook and then tying on the number 3 Nordic bend hook on the end. It doesn't really matter what type of knot you use here. This mini pennel setup is to stop the hook bait sliding up the hook length, or even worse, sliding down and masking the hook point. Once the tag end is cut, you can attach the cascade clip to the other end of the hook length. Then it's a question of repeating the process to the upper snood. But this time, instead of retainer hook, thread on a sequin, then a small bead, and then either use power gum or ordinary mono, as in this case, and tie a stop knot to secure these in place. A small ordinary swivel finishes off this hook length. I then tie the lead clip of choice onto the main rig line. Then it's a question of adding the rest of the rig components in sequence. Starting with a crimp to go below the lower snood, one of these beads, a cascade clip, another oval bead, a crimp for going below the upper snood, an oval bead, the ordinary swivel, and then another bead. Lastly, whatever you use to attach your rig to the shock leader, I much prefer to use clips. Then all that's left to do is to secure the crimps in place and tie stop knots above each of the snoods. Attach a lead to the lead clip, then put the bottom hook in place and tighten the line to figure out where the crimp needs to be secured. Use a pair of pliers if you haven't got a crimping tool. Make sure you leave a little bit of wiggle room for the cascade clip before you tie your stop knot above the top bead. If you're fishing where larger fish might be encountered and you're worried about the bead slipping over the crimp, you could always add a micro bead in between the crimp and the main bead. Now fix your upper snood in place by putting the hook over the cascade clip, straightening the line, squeezing down your crimp and then tying the remaining stop knot. The rig is now finished, and as you can see it's very streamlined, which helps getting that extra distance on your cast for finding those soles and Plaice at extreme range. When conditions aren't right for Plaice, it's time to target bass and anything else that swims. You can use the same rigs as before, but for bass I like to either use pulley pennels, or my preferred rig is the long 2-snood clip down rig with 3 O's for fishing with crab. I describe how to make these in one of my other videos. See the link in the top right hand corner. Again, they are for distance use. If you target bass down the edge or in the gutter, then a simple running ledger will do. I know that plenty of large bass come out from Seaford, but I personally haven't tried specimen fishing for them. I would imagine that live bait rigs work well as mackerel flappers when the shoals of these fish move in late summer. However, when the Plaice aren't feeding, I'm content with catching bass of this size. From April and all the way into July, unfortunately, you've got to be prepared to deal with these. Spider crabs can be a real pain at times, stripping all of your worm hook baits and snipping off hook lengths if you leave your rigs out for too long. One of the best things about Seaford for the visiting angler is the ease of access to all of the marks, and of course the free parking all the way along the esplanade. My favoured bass mark is at the beach huts near Splash Point. The public toilets near the Martello Tower are quite handy. A stretch of Seaford Beach near Frankies is one of my favourites, particularly for soles. Then moving in the direction of Newhaven, you come across a couple of favoured winter marks. Before the Salt recreational ground, and then the most fished marks along this stretch, Edinburgh Road and all the way towards the Buckle. At times it can be difficult to find a space to fish along these stretches, as these marks have the reputation of being the hot spots for Plaice. Often, to be away from the crowds, you have to walk past the yacht club and holiday camp and all the way towards Tidemills, or park at the Tidemills car park. Newhaven East Beach is at the western end of Seaford Bay and this overlooks the arms of Newhaven Harbour. The Newhaven marks are worth fishing, with the added advantage of being closer to where the tackle shops are. The western arm, however, is closed to the public, and you're going to have to pay for parking here. Of the stretch that's referred to as Seaford Beach, it's the Buckle that gets the most attention. It's rare to come here and not find anyone fishing there. It's very popular with those feathering for mackerel in late July and August. However, at this time of the year, you might have to be patient and wait until the evening when the bulk of the sunbathers have gone. Sport can be hectic at the top of the tide for both feathering and on your bottom baits. There seems to be a greater variety of fish along this stretch of beach, with a lot of immature fish of a variety of species coming out. Plenty of small smooth hounds will take ragworm here. You can catch slightly larger ones, particularly towards Newhaven East Beach. And I have had 2 and 3 pounders there in daylight. I'm not sure what the potential is for larger ones, since I don't fish here at night. It's a good idea to stay close to your bait rod if you are feathering and fishing bottom baits at the same time. You can't guarantee mackerel here, but you'll know when they're present because of the number of other anglers trying to catch them. Feathering isn't for everyone, but why miss out when shoals of mackerel are in? You can always try spinning for them, but at times when there aren't enough around, I tend to prefer to use the bee keys. At other times, when there are a lot of mackerel about, it can be difficult to continue bait fishing when everyone around you is feathering for mackerel. The inevitable will happen. Someone will cross your line, and at that point it's probably a good idea to pack one rod away and just fish one on the bottom. My glum look here is not because of crossed lines, but because I've just lost a rig whilst casting, which is the first time that's happened for a long time along this stretch. There are snags to the east side of Buckle car park, but this area is pretty snag free. High tide towards dusk brings in other immature fish. Here we have thornback ray, obviously not of specimen size. Larger ones are caught using fish baits rather than rag, but you're more likely to catch these at darkness. On balance though, the Buckle, noted by the Martello-like tower behind me, does seem to be the most consistent stretch along Seaford Beach. The other species you're likely to catch at Seaford during spring and summer during tide time include flounders, particularly if the water is coloured. These will feed when the Plaice won't. Tub gurnards show with the fading light. On occasion you'll get black bream, particularly in June. And some specimen pouting can also be caught. This one is well over £1. Nighttime fishing here can also be very productive, but I've yet to put in that time. It's worth noting local bylaws for keeping your catch. And if you found this video of use, please check out my other Seaford videos which focus in on particular marks